A remote village, 80 inhabitants, 5 days of winter. In the end, 72 people dead. 90% of the population erased before anyone noticed. No hospital, no doctor, no complete record of what happened. The story almost disappeared with them, but with the help of artificial intelligence, you will see reconstructed step by step how an entire community collapsed while the rest of the world moved on. This is Breivik Mission, Alaska, November 1918, and this is the anatomy of a silent extermination. Breivik Mission sat on the edge of the Bering Strait, 300 kilometers north of Nome, the nearest port. In winter, the sea froze. No ships entered or left. The village remained completely isolated for months, and this had always been its protection. Diseases that devastated the south did not reach there. The cold was a barrier, the distance, a wall. 80 people lived there, all Inupiat, seal hunters, salmon fishermen, families who had known that place for generations, wooden cabins resisting the Arctic wind, fires burning against the permanent cold, a small but functional community, self-sufficient, resilient. The village was a perfect social gear for the Arctic. There were no complex hierarchies. There was no bureaucracy, only interdependent functions. The men hunted seals and walruses. The women tanned hides and prepared food. The elders taught the children. The children helped with chores. Everything was connected. Everything depended on everyone. This total interdependence was its strength, but it was also its invisible vulnerability, because when something attacked one, it would attack all. And when everyone fell at the same time, there would be no one left to hold up the system. In 1918, something was moving through the world. The Spanish flu. A mutant H1N1 strain with a lethal characteristic. It attacked healthy immune systems. The stronger the immune response, the worse the outcome. The body reacted with such violence that the lungs filled with fluid, pulmonary edema, respiratory failure, suffocation. Young adults, the strongest, the healthiest, died first. By September 1918, the flu had already crossed Europe, the United States, and Asia. 50 million dead in 2 years, more than the entire First World War. Large cities had hospitals, doctors, and some infrastructure to try and contain it. Small towns suffered more, but remote villages without doctors, without medicine, without communication with the outside world, those villages didn't suffer. They simply disappeared. The virus arrived in Nome in October. A ship from Seattle brought infected passengers. Within days, the port was paralyzed. But Nome still had 200 hospital beds. It still had doctors. It still had telegraphs to ask for help. Breivik Mission had none of that. In late October, a trader arrived by boat from Nome. He brought winter supplies, flour, sugar, ammunition, essential goods to survive until spring. And he brought something else: fever, cough, extreme fatigue, symptoms he barely noticed. The man disembarked. He greeted the inhabitants. He delivered the goods. He talked. He left. 3 days later, the first family fell ill. Sudden fever, body aches, dry cough. At first it seemed like just a common flu, something that would pass, but it didn't pass. The fever rose. Breathing became difficult. Their lips turned blue. Cyanosis, lack of oxygen. In 48 hours, the father of the family was dead. The wife tried to care for the children. She fed them. She changed them. She prayed. She also fell ill. She also died. The neighbors came to help. They took the children. They covered the bodies. They brought food. And they took the virus with them. Because the virus spread through the air, through coughing, through breathing, through contact. And in a village of 80 people, where everyone knew each other, where everyone helped each other, where no one was left alone, contagion was instantaneous. 5 days after the trader's arrival, half the village was sick. 10 days later, the only ones still standing were very small children and 3 adults. 15 days later, 72 people were dead. 72 hours was the time it took for the virus to kill. But what killed wasn't just the virus. It was the speed. When the hunters fell ill, the hunting stopped. Without hunting, there was no fresh meat. Without meat, there was no protein. Without protein, weak bodies couldn't fight the infection. When the women fell ill, food preparation stopped. The fires began to go out. The cold crept through the cracks. And in the Arctic in November, without fire, you die in hours. When the elders died, the knowledge died with them. Who knew which plants could lower a fever? Who knew the healing rituals? Who kept the memory of past epidemics? Dead, all dead. When the parents died, the children were orphaned, alone, without food, without heat, without protection. The collapse was not just biological, it was structural. There was no time scale, there were no phases, there was no wave 1, wave 2. It was a tsunami, instant, brutal, total. The cabins became filled with bodies. There was no strength left to carry them. The few adults still alive were too sick, too weak, too traumatized. There was no way to dig graves. The ground was frozen. The permafrost was hard as concrete. Some bodies were piled outside the cabins. The cold preserved them. Others remained inside the houses, covered with seal skins. Entire families frozen where they died. Children clutching dead parents. Siblings huddled together trying to stay warm. Elders motionless in the beds where they spent their final hours. The children who survived the flu began to die from cold and hunger. 3 adults remained alive, 2 men and 1 woman. They tried to keep the children warm. They burned furniture. They burned clothes. They burned whatever they found. They tried to ice fish, but they were too weak, too sick. The entire village had turned into a silent necropolis. No bell rang, no smoke rose, no dog barked, only silence and cold. It took 3 weeks for the news to reach Nome. A fishing boat passed by the coast. The crew looked toward Breivik mission. They expected to see smoke coming from the cabins. They expected to see movement, people, life. They saw nothing. No smoke, no movement, absolute silence. They docked. They walked to the village. They opened the first cabin. Bodies. They opened the second. More bodies. They opened the third, the fourth, the fifth. Always bodies. Some were still in bed. Others on the floor, frozen in positions of agony. Children clutching dead parents. Entire families vanished under the same roof. The fishermen didn't know what to do. They couldn't carry 72 people. They couldn't bury them individually. The ground was frozen. There was no equipment, there was no time. So they improvised a mass grave. They dynamited the permafrost. They opened a rift in the earth. They piled the bodies. They covered them with dirt and stones. 72 people in a single grave, no names marked, no rituals completed, just a scar on the Arctic soil. The 8 survivors, all children or teenagers, were taken to Nome. Some were adopted by Inupiat families from other villages. Others were sent to government-run boarding schools, separated, dispersed, traumatized. None of them returned to Breivik mission. The village was abandoned. The cabins collapsed under the weight of the snow. The wind took the roofs. Time erased the tracks. For years, Breivik mission was just a spot on the map, a place where 80 people lived, and where 72 died in 5 days. The village was rebuilt decades later. New inhabitants arrived, but the memory of what happened remained buried, literally. For decades, Breivik mission was just a footnote in the history of the Spanish flu, a statistic. A remote Alaskan village suffers high mortality during 1918 pandemic, but in 1951, something changed. A scientist named Johan Hultin read about the village. He read about the mass grave, and he realized something crucial. The bodies were frozen, preserved in the permafrost. What if the Spanish flu virus was also preserved? If he could recover lung tissue from the victims, maybe he could study the virus that killed 50 million people. Maybe he could understand what made that flu so lethal. Hultin traveled to Breivik mission. He asked the elders for permission to exhume the grave. He explained that he wanted to study the disease, that he wanted to prevent future pandemics. Some elders agreed, on one condition, that the research helped save lives. Hultin dug. He found the bodies still intact, frozen, preserved, as if they had died yesterday. He collected lung tissue samples. He stored them in vials. He went home. But the technology of 1951 was not enough to sequence the virus. Hultin kept the samples. He waited. 46 years later, in 1997, Hultin received a letter. A virologist named Jeffrey Taubenberger was trying to reconstruct the genome of the Spanish flu. He needed preserved samples. He needed lung tissue from 1918 victims. Hultin, at 73 years old, returned to Alaska. He returned to Breivik mission. He exhumed the grave again. He dug into the permafrost. He found the bodies. He collected more tissue. This time, it worked. In 2005, the complete genome of the 1918 H1N1 virus was sequenced. For the first time, scientists understood exactly what made that flu so lethal. The structure of the surface proteins, the ability to invade deep lung cells, the cytokine storm that drowned the lungs in fluid. And all of this was possible because 72 people died in 5 days, in a village so cold that their bodies remained intact for 80 years. Gottheimer Breivik mission lost 90% of its population, but it wasn't the only one. Nome lost half. Wales, another Inupiat village, lost 180 out of 200 inhabitants. Tela mission lost 85%. All of Alaska was devastated. Indigenous communities that had survived centuries of colonization, famine, and diseases brought by Europeans almost disappeared in weeks. And it wasn't because they were weak, it was because they were small. Large populations absorb pandemics. Thousands die, but millions survive. There is a margin to lose people and still keep the system functioning. Small populations don't have that margin. When everyone falls ill at the same time, there is no one to care for the sick. There is no one to hunt. There is no one to cook. There is no one to keep the fire burning. The system collapses even before the disease finished killing. Today, Breivik mission exists again. It has about 400 inhabitants. The school was rebuilt. The church remains. The houses are modern. There is electricity. There is internet. There is heating. There is communication with the outside world. But at the edge of the village, there is a monument, a simple wooden cross, marking the mass grave of 1918. 72 people are still there, frozen, preserved, silent witnesses to how a pandemic can erase a community in less time than it takes for ice to melt. The Spanish flu killed 50 million people globally. Entire cities were devastated. Hospitals collapsed. Economies stopped. Governments mobilized resources. But in Breivik mission, there was no hospital collapse. There was no hospital. There was no quarantine. There were no health authorities. There was no emergency mobilization. There were no telegraphs. There was only silence. And when the silence was finally noticed, it was already too late. In 2020, when another pandemic began to spread through the world, virologists returned to study Breivik mission. Not for the bodies, but for the pattern. Small communities, isolated, without medical infrastructure, high social interdependence, low capacity to absorb external shocks. What happened in 1918 was not unique. It was a model, a manual of how pandemics destroy fragile systems. And the question Breivik mission left behind is not historical, it is structural. How many communities today are one outbreak away from total collapse? How many remote villages, small towns, vulnerable groups depend on systems so fragile that a single disease could erase them? Breivik mission was rebuilt, but the 72 people buried in the permafrost never came back. And the lesson they left remains frozen, waiting for someone to take it seriously before the next pandemic arrives. Does this really sound like ancient history, or does it feel uncomfortably familiar? I am Tom, reconstructing how civilizations built their own collapses, and together, we keep history being reborn. If you want to see the architecture of other tragedies, other systems that seemed solid but had invisible cracks, leave it in the comments. Which disaster do you want me to reconstruct? I'll see you in the next era.